Would you help a stranger if you knew it would destroy everything you built? Hold on, don't answer yet. Keep that question in the back of your mind. Because the story I'm about to tell you is going to change the way you answer it. Nathan was 32 years old and had one absolute certainty about life: nobody gives you anything for free. Everything he had, he earned with his own hands. Grew up in a broken family in a small town in rural Tennessee. Mom worked as a hotel housekeeper. Dad left before Nathan could walk. He grew up watching his mother scrub bathroom floors until her knees gave out. And he swore to himself, still a kid, that he would never depend on anyone. And he kept that promise. By 25, Nathan had a small freight logistics company in Nashville. Nothing glamorous, nothing that would make headlines, but it was his. 3 trucks, 7 employees, a cramped office in a rented warehouse off Dickerson Pike. He slept 4-5 hours a night. Woke up before the sun and only stopped when his body couldn't take it anymore. The business grew slowly. By 30, he had 11 trucks. By 31, he landed his first major contract with a regional grocery chain. And for the first time in his life, Nathan felt like maybe, just maybe, things were actually going to work out. He had a fiancée, Caroline. Beautiful, smart, law degree from Vanderbilt. They met at a friend's party, one of those parties you almost don't go to. Nathan almost didn't go. He was exhausted, had worked all day, but a buddy insisted so much that he gave in. And there she was. Wide smile, brown eyes, a way of talking that made Nathan forget the rest of the world existed. They dated for 2 years. Got engaged on a trip to Gatlinburg, in a simple cabin, nothing extravagant. Nathan wasn't one for grand gestures. He was practical. Efficient. Caroline understood that, or at least that's what he thought. Nathan's life was a well-oiled machine. Company growing, fiancé by his side, plans for the future. He was about to put a down payment on a house in the Sylvan Park neighborhood. He'd saved $140,000 over 5 years of grinding. $140,000. Every cent earned, counted, protected. For someone who came from where he came from, that money wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof that he made it. And this is where the story really begins. It was a Wednesday in January. Cold in Tennessee, that kind of damp cold that seeps into your bones. Nathan was driving back from a delivery he did himself because a driver called in sick. Something he hated doing but did without complaining. On his way back down Interstate 40, just past Cookeville, he saw a car pulled over on the shoulder. An old Buick LeSabre, faded blue, hood up, white smoke pouring from the engine. And standing next to the car, an old man. A gentleman who had to be in his mid-70s. Short, thin, dark-weathered skin. Wore a faded trucker cap and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. He was just standing there, staring at the engine like a man looking at a problem he couldn't solve. Nathan drove right past. Glanced in the rearview mirror and kept going. He was in a hurry. Had a meeting at 4 o'clock with the operations manager at the grocery chain to discuss renewing the contract. That contract was worth $200,000 a year. He couldn't be late. But something nagged at him. It wasn't pity. Nathan didn't do pity. He had an almost physical allergy to other people's sympathy because he'd spent his whole life being the object of it. It was something else. It was the image. That old man, alone, on the side of a highway, with no one around. And suddenly Nathan saw his mother. Not literally, of course. But he saw in that man the same expression his mother wore when the power got shut off and she didn't have the money to turn it back on. That mix of shame and resignation. That look of someone who's already gotten used to not getting help. Nathan hit the brakes. Checked the clock. 3:12. The meeting was at 4. He could make it, but it'd be tight. Very tight. He pulled the truck around, drove back about 200 yards and parked behind the Buick. The old man looked at him with suspicion. And I need you to understand this, suspicion. Not gratitude. Not relief. Suspicion. Like he was expecting Nathan to ask for something or, worse, to be somebody dangerous. Nathan climbed down from the truck and said, "Afternoon, sir, you need some help?" The old man took a while to respond. Pulled off his cap, scratched his head and said, "Car overheated, son, but I'm all right, already called my grandson, he's on his way." Nathan glanced at the phone in the old man's hand. It was one of those old flip phones. The screen was dark. He hadn't called anyone. The old man was lying. And Nathan understood why: pride. The same pride he carried himself. "Let me take a look, sir," Nathan said, already walking toward the hood. Sometimes it's just the radiator hose. The old man's name was Samuel. Mr. Samuel. And little by little, while Nathan worked on the engine, which really was the radiator hose, cracked and leaking, the old man opened up. He lived in a small town called Monterey, about 40 minutes from there. Lived alone. His wife had passed 8 years ago. Had a son who lived in Chicago and called every now and then. The grandson he mentioned, he existed, yes. But lived in Denver and they hadn't spoken in over a year. Mr. Samuel was coming back from Nashville. Had gone to the hospital to get some tests done. When Nathan asked what kind of tests, the old man deflected. "Old people stuff, son. Nothing serious." Nathan rigged a repair on the hose with some high-temperature tape he always kept in the truck. Put water in the radiator. Started the car. It worked. The old man thanked him with a firm handshake, surprisingly firm for a man his age, and said something that Nathan thought was odd at the time but later forgot. He said, "God brought you here, son. You don't know it, but God brought you here." Nathan gave a polite smile, wished him a safe drive and ran back to the truck. Checked the clock. 3:47. 13 minutes to the meeting. He drove like a maniac. Got there at 4:11. The manager had already left. The receptionist said he waited 10 minutes and walked out. Nathan called, apologized, tried to reschedule. The manager was cold. Said he'd reschedule for the following week. And he did. And the following week, he showed up with a new proposal, a 20% reduction in the contract value. Claimed he'd received better offers from competing haulers. Nathan knew it was retaliation for being late. Knew it was personal. But he had no choice. He accepted. $40,000 less per year. Because of 20 minutes on a highway helping a stranger. Caroline heard the story and was irritated. Didn't say anything at first, but Nathan could tell. Dinner that night was silent. And when he mentioned, half laughing, that he lost 40 grand because of an old Buick, she replied without looking at him, "You could have called and told him you'd be late, Nathan. You have a phone." And she was right. He could have. But he didn't think of it. And that ate at him for weeks. 2 weeks later, on a Friday, Nathan got a call from an unknown number. It was Mr. Samuel. Nathan had no idea how the old man got his number. He asked, and Mr. Samuel said he wrote down the truck's DOT number and had a friend who worked at the DMV look it up. Nathan thought it was strange, but the old man was so genuinely warm that he let it go. Mr. Samuel called to thank him again. Said the car was running fine. And then he made an invitation that caught Nathan off guard. "Son, you want to come over for Sunday dinner sometime? I make a pot roast that'll make you forget your own name." Nathan was going to say no. His mouth was already forming the word. But something, he couldn't explain it. Something in that voice. That loneliness disguised as hospitality. He said he'd think about it. And a week later, on a Sunday morning, he found himself driving to Monterey. Alone. Caroline didn't want to go. Said she had things to do. Mr. Samuel's house was simple. Very simple. A small wood frame house with peeling paint. Worn hardwood floors. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen and a porch with 2 plastic chairs. But it was clean. Organized with an almost obsessive care. Everything in its place. And the pot roast, it was the best pot roast Nathan had ever eaten in his life. They talked for hours. Mr. Samuel had a remarkable memory. Told stories from his youth, from when he worked as a ranch hand on a cattle farm in Crossville, how he met his wife at a church social, how he lost his first child, a girl, stillborn, and nearly lost his mind from grief. Told all of it with a calmness that was almost unsettling. Like a man who'd already made peace with every scar. And at some point during the conversation, Nathan realized he was crying. For no apparent reason. Or for every reason in the world. He didn't know. Mr. Samuel didn't say a word. Just got up, went to the kitchen and came back with 2 cups of coffee. Placed one in front of Nathan and sat back down. Waited. Didn't ask anything. Didn't try to fix anything. Just was there. And Nathan, for the first time in years, talked. Talked about his mom. About his childhood. About the father he never knew. About the constant fear of losing everything. About the feeling that he was never enough, no matter how hard he worked. Talked about Caroline. About how sometimes he felt she loved the idea of who he could become more than who he actually was. Said things he'd never told anyone. And when he finished, Mr. Samuel said something simple. He said, "You work so hard to prove you deserve to be here, son. But you're already here. Nobody needs proof." Nathan left Monterey that Sunday with a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't happiness. It was lightness. A lightness he hadn't felt since he was a child. The visits became monthly. Then bi-weekly. Then almost weekly. Nathan would go Sunday morning, have dinner with Mr. Samuel, they'd talk all afternoon and he'd head back by evening. Caroline started to complain. First subtly, "You're going again?" Then more directly, "Nathan, you're neglecting us to go visit an old man you barely know." And Nathan would get frustrated. Because in his mind, he wasn't neglecting anything. He was working as hard as ever. Paying the bills. Being present. But Caroline wanted a kind of presence that Nathan didn't know how to give. She wanted conversation. Emotional intimacy. She wanted him to share what he felt. And the irony, the cruel irony, is that he was sharing all of that with Mr. Samuel. Not with her. 3 months after the visit started, Mr. Samuel told Nathan about the tests. It was cancer. Pancreatic. The diagnosis had come back the day they met. That day on the highway. Mr. Samuel was driving back from the hospital when the car broke down. He already knew. And when he said, "God brought you here," it wasn't just a figure of speech. It was the words of a man who had just received a death sentence and found, on the side of a road, the first person who looked at him with humanity in months. The prognosis was bad. 6 months to a year. Palliative care only. Mr. Samuel refused chemo. Said he wasn't going to spend his final months throwing up and too weak to stand. He was going to live. His way. And Nathan broke. Not in front of the old man. Not in that moment. He held it together, smiled, said everything would be all right. But when he got in his truck to drive back to Nashville, he pulled over onto the shoulder and cried like he hadn't cried since he was 10 years old. And here the story takes a turn you probably don't expect. Pay attention. Nathan decided to help Mr. Samuel financially. The old man lived on Social Security alone. The house needed repairs. The car was on its last legs. And the medications, the palliative ones, cost more than he could afford. Nathan started by paying for the medications. Then fixed the bathroom. Then replaced the roof that leaked. Then bought a used car, a Honda Civic, 2018, nothing fancy, but safe. Mr. Samuel resisted. Resisted hard. Even got angry. Said he wasn't a charity case, that he hadn't asked for anything, that he wouldn't accept handouts. Nathan needed 3 long conversations to convince the old man that it wasn't charity. It was repayment. For what exactly, Nathan couldn't explain. But he felt he owed it. The problem is that money has limits. And Nathan was spending more than he could afford. In 6 months, he'd put nearly $25,000 into Mr. Samuel. $25,000 of the $140,000 that were meant for the down payment on the house. Caroline didn't know. He hid it. Transferred in small amounts, always inventing some company expense. And here's a detail I need to tell you because it's going to be important later. During one of the visits, Mr. Samuel showed Nathan a piece of land. A plot behind his property, past a barbed wire fence. About 3/4 of an acre of overgrown brush. "This belonged to my father," said Mr. Samuel. "It's in my name, but I never did anything with it. When I die, the weeds'll just take it over." Nathan didn't think much of it. A plot of land in rural Tennessee, in the middle of nowhere, near Monterey, wasn't worth much. Maybe $5,000–10,000. Nothing that would change anyone's life. He stored that piece of information in the back of his mind and forgot about it. The months went by. Mr. Samuel's condition worsened. The pain increased. The medications got more expensive. And Nathan went every week, without fail. Rain or shine, whether the company was on fire or not. He went. And the company was on fire. The contract with the grocery chain, the one that had already been reduced, wasn't renewed. The manager, that same one, chose another hauler. Nathan lost 20% of his revenue overnight. And instead of focusing on recovery, on prospecting new clients, on reorganizing the business, he was in Monterey, taking care of an old man. Caroline reached her breaking point on a Saturday in November. Nathan had just gotten back from Monterey and found her sitting in the living room with an expression he'd never seen before. Too calm. Too controlled. She said, "Nathan, I need to ask you something and I want you to be honest." He sat down. She asked how much money he'd given to Mr. Samuel. Nathan tried to downplay it. Said, "Just a little here and there, help with medicine, that kind of thing." Caroline opened the banking app on her phone and showed him the statement. She had access to their joint account. Not the business account, but the personal one where the house savings were. And the savings had shrunk. Not $25,000. By that point, it was $37,000. Nathan had lost count. Between medications, renovations, the car, private medical consultations he was paying for so Mr. Samuel could have more dignified palliative care, $37,000. Caroline didn't yell. Didn't cry. Didn't make a scene. And that was worse. She said, in the coldest voice Nathan had ever heard, "You chose a stranger. You chose him over our future. I'm not going to compete with that." And she gave back the ring. Right there. Right then. No drama. No negotiation. No, let's talk about it. Gave it back and walked out. Nathan sat in the living room for 2 hours. Didn't move. Didn't call her. Didn't chase after her. Because deep down, and this is a terrible thing to admit, deep down he knew she was right. And he knew that, even so, he'd do it all again. In the weeks that followed, Nathan spiraled. The company kept losing contracts. 2 drivers quit because paychecks were late. The warehouse rent went up and he couldn't negotiate it down. The savings kept shrinking because the care for Mr. Samuel didn't stop. By February, 8 months after meeting the old man on the highway, Nathan was running the company in the red, personal savings down to $87,000, over $50,000 less than what he started with, and alone. No fiancé. No growth prospects. A company that shrank every month. And he kept going to Monterey every Sunday. Around this time, the conversations with Mr. Samuel changed. The old man was weaker. Talked less. Slept more. But when he did talk, every word seemed to carry the weight of the world. In one of those conversations, Mr. Samuel said, "Nathan, I need to tell you something." Nathan assumed it was about the disease. That it had gotten worse. That the doctors had given a shorter timeline. But that wasn't it. Mr. Samuel said, "I have another son." Nathan was confused. The old man had only mentioned one son, the one in Chicago. "Not a blood son," Mr. Samuel continued. "A boy I raised. Long time ago. Before you were born." And he told the story. In the 80s, Mr. Samuel and his wife took in a homeless boy in Monterey. A kid of about 12, no family, no papers, no nothing. Raised him like a son for 4 years. The boy was smart, sharp, hardworking. Mr. Samuel paid for school, food, clothes. And at 16, the boy said he was leaving. That he was going to try his luck in Memphis. Mr. Samuel tried to stop him, but the kid left. And never came back. Never sent word. Vanished. "I looked for that boy for years," said the old man. "Never found him. Don't know if he's alive, don't know if he died. Don't know anything. And every single day I think about him. Every single day." Nathan listened in silence. He didn't understand why the old man was telling him this at that moment, but he didn't interrupt. Mr. Samuel looked at him with those tired eyes and said, "You remind me of him, you know that? The stubbornness, the pride, the need to fix everything on your own, you're just like him." Nathan felt a lump in his throat but didn't say anything. And the conversation died there. March came. Mr. Samuel's health collapsed. He was admitted to the hospital in Cookeville. Nathan visited almost every day after work, making the hour-and-a-half drive each way, staying for 2 hours and driving back. He'd get home wrecked. Sleep 3 hours and wake up for work. The company was in freefall. He'd lost 2 more contracts. Was operating with only 4 trucks, the rest were parked because he couldn't afford maintenance. The employees who remained worked scared, wondering if they'd be next to miss a paycheck. And Nathan kept paying for the hospital. Private room. Round-the-clock nurse. Top-tier medication. The money was melting. And he knew. He knew exactly what he was doing. Knew he was destroying everything he'd built. And he could not stop. Because every time he thought about stopping, he saw Mr. Samuel's face. He saw the man who, for the first time in his life, made Nathan feel seen. Not for the money. Not for the success. Not for the company. Seen for who he was. The scared kid pretending to be tough. The fatherless son who built a house of cards to hide his fragility. Mr. Samuel saw all of that. And never judged. In April, Mr. Samuel called Nathan to the hospital and said he needed to take care of something. Asked Nathan to go to his house in Monterey and get a folder that was stored in a lockbox under the bed. Nathan went. Found the folder. It was old, brown cardboard, tied with twine. Inside were documents. The deed to the land. His wife's death certificate. His son's birth certificate, the one in Chicago. And a sealed envelope. With Nathan's name on it. Handwritten. In Mr. Samuel's shaky script. Nathan sat on the old man's bed and stared at the envelope. Didn't open it. Felt like it wasn't the right time. Took the folder to the hospital. Mr. Samuel took the folder, sorted through the documents and handed Nathan the land deed. "This is for you," said the old man. Nathan refused. Immediately. Without thinking. "No, Mr. Samuel. I can't accept this. You have a son, you have a grandson." "My son hasn't come to see me in 3 years," said the old man without bitterness. "And my grandson doesn't even know I'm sick. This land goes to who's here. And who's here is you." Nathan went quiet. Mr. Samuel continued, "I know you spent money on me. I know you lost things because of me. I'm not stupid, Nathan. I'm old, but I'm not stupid. And I know this land isn't worth what you spent. But it's what I have. It's everything I have to give." Nathan accepted. Not for the land. He accepted because refusing would have denied the old man the only thing he could still offer, dignity. The feeling that he wasn't just a receiver of charity. That he had something to give too. In May, Mr. Samuel died. A Tuesday morning. Nathan wasn't there. He was in a meeting at the bank trying to renegotiate the company's debt. When the hospital called, he was sitting across from the loan officer, hearing that he needed to put up one of the trucks as collateral to keep the credit line open. He walked out of the bank without saying a word. Drove to Cookeville. When he arrived, Mr. Samuel had already been taken. The room was empty. Clean. As if no one had ever been there. On the bedside table, the nurse had left the old man's belongings. The trucker cap. A wooden rosary. And the envelope. That envelope with Nathan's name on it. He picked up the envelope and put it in his pocket. Didn't open it. Couldn't. The funeral was 2 days later, at the cemetery in Monterey. 7 people showed up. Nathan, the nurse who'd cared for him at the hospital, 2 elderly neighbors, the pastor, the gravedigger, and a woman Nathan didn't recognize. Later he learned she was a distant cousin from Crossville. The son from Chicago didn't come. Sent a text saying he couldn't get a flight. The grandson in Denver was never reached. 7 people. An entire life of 74 years reduced to 7 people at a small-town cemetery. Nathan stayed last. When everyone left, he sat on the grass beside the grave and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. 3 pages, handwritten, in that shaky script. I'm not going to read you the whole letter because it's long and personal. But I'll tell you the parts that matter. The first paragraph said, "Nathan, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And if I'm gone, then I can tell you the truth without having to see the disappointment on your face." The truth. Mr. Samuel didn't meet Nathan by accident. The radiator hose didn't crack on its own. He cut it. With a pocket knife. On purpose. He stopped on that stretch of highway on purpose. And he waited. He didn't wait for Nathan specifically. He waited for anyone. Anyone who would stop. And Nathan stopped. Now I need you to hold on to that piece of information and pay close attention to what comes next, because it changes everything. The letter went on to explain why. Mr. Samuel had received the diagnosis that morning. Terminal cancer. And he sat in his car, in the hospital parking lot, and thought about ending it all. Right then. That day. He didn't want to die slowly. Didn't want to waste away. Didn't want to be a burden. His wife was already gone. His son didn't care. His grandson didn't exist in any practical sense. He was alone. And a man alone with a death sentence has thoughts that a man with company doesn't have. But Mr. Samuel was a man of faith. And his faith told him that taking his own life was an unforgivable sin. So he made a pact. With God, with the universe, with whatever was out there. He said, I'm going to stop on this highway. I'm going to sabotage my car. And I'm going to wait. If someone stops to help me, it's a sign that there are still good people in this world. And then I'll stay. I'll fight. I'll live whatever time I have left. But if no one stops, then there's no reason to stay. He waited 40 minutes. 40 minutes on the side of that highway. 32 cars passed. He counted. 32 cars passed without stopping. The 33rd was Nathan's truck. Which also passed. And came back. Nathan feels the weight of those words as he reads. He almost didn't come back. Almost kept driving to the meeting. Almost left the old man there. And if he had? Mr. Samuel was saying, in the letter, that he wouldn't have been there the next morning. Nathan saved that man's life and didn't even know it. And Mr. Samuel knew, from the very first day, that Nathan had saved his life. That's why the phrase, God brought you here. It wasn't religion. It was survival. The letter continued. And here it gets heavier. Mr. Samuel wrote that in the first months, when Nathan started visiting him, he felt guilty. Because he saw Nathan getting attached. Saw the young man finding in him the father he never had. And he knew, the old man knew, that when he died, it would break Nathan all over again. It would be another abandonment. Another loss. But he couldn't push him away. Because Nathan had saved him too. Not just that day on the highway. Every Sunday. Every visit. Every conversation. Every plate of pot roast. Nathan gave Mr. Samuel what the old man wanted most in his final months: company. Presence. The feeling that someone cared. And then comes the part of the letter that changes everything. Changes the whole story. Pay attention. Mr. Samuel wrote, "Nathan, that piece of land I gave you. I know you think it's worthless. You even made a face when I handed it over, like someone receiving a gift out of politeness. But I need to tell you something. About 20 years ago, a man came here from Knoxville wanting to buy the land. Offered a sum that back then was a lot of money. I turned him down because it was my father's land. The man left but gave me his card. I kept that card all these years without knowing why. It's inside this folder, in a small envelope. His name is Dr. Marcus Albright. He was a geologist." Nathan searched the folder. Found the card. Yellowed with age. Dr. Marcus Albright. Geologist. University of Tennessee Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences. At the time, the letter explained, the geologist was conducting research on mineral formations in the Cumberland Plateau region. And he found something on that land that made him very interested. Mr. Samuel didn't fully understand it back then. Didn't think much of it. He was a simple man, not well educated, who lived on Social Security and raised chickens. Geology was as distant from his world as astrophysics. But he kept the card. For no reason. Like someone who keeps an old coin without knowing its value. The letter ended with these words, "Nathan, I don't know what's in that land. Maybe nothing. Maybe the geologist is already dead and none of this matters. But I ask you one thing, go find out. If not for yourself, do it for me. Because the only thing I want is for your life to get better because of me, the same way mine got better because of you. I love you like a son. And I die at peace knowing that, of all the cars that passed on that highway, yours was the one that came back." Nathan sat there, on the grass of the cemetery, letter in hand, for over an hour. Cried until there were no tears left. And then, he stood up. And did what Mr. Samuel asked. The next morning, he called the university. Asked for Dr. Marcus Albright. And here I should tell you, Nathan was certain it would lead nowhere. 20 years. The guy was probably retired. Or dead. Or wouldn't remember a piece of land in Monterey. But the department secretary said Dr. Albright was still there. Still active. Taught classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Could see someone on Wednesday. Nathan went. Walked into the professor's office, a room full of rocks, maps, books stacked on the floor. Dr. Albright was a man in his early 60s, bald, thick glasses, with that academic manner of someone who lives more in the world of ideas than in the real world. When Nathan explained who he was and showed the card, the professor's eyes went wide. "Samuel's property," he said. "You own that land?" Nathan confirmed. Showed the deed. And Dr. Albright sat down, took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes and said, "Son, I spent 20 years trying to get back to that property. I offered Samuel a fortune back then and he turned me down. Tried again 4 more times after that and he wouldn't even discuss it." Nathan asked what was on that land. And the professor explained. That part of the Cumberland Plateau sits on geological formations that include sections of what geologists call the Knox Group. And within the Knox Group, there are pockets of a rock called dolomite, which under certain geological conditions can host deposits of high-purity zinc and barite. I know that sounds complicated. Simplified, Mr. Samuel's land was sitting on top of a mineral deposit. But not just any deposit. Dr. Albright explained that the samples he collected 20 years earlier indicated a concentration of zinc and barite that was unusual for that region. And zinc, Nathan didn't know this, is one of the most important industrial metals in the world. Used in everything from galvanizing steel to batteries to pharmaceuticals. Every ton of high-purity zinc is worth a lot of money. But the professor gave a caveat. He said, "I can't guarantee anything. What I found 20 years ago was a surface sample. To know if there's a commercially viable deposit, you need a full survey. Core drilling, lab analysis, geological mapping. That costs money." "How much?" Nathan asked. "Around $15,000–20,000 for a preliminary survey." Nathan didn't have $20,000 to spare. But he had $87,000 in the account. Money that was supposed to be the down payment on the house. Money that had already shrunk by over $50,000 because of Mr. Samuel. And now, the old man was asking for more. In a way. From the grave, he was asking for more. Nathan thought about it for 3 days. Called his mom, something he rarely did. Told her everything. His mother listened in silence and said, "Baby, that old man gave you more than money can buy. If he said go find out, then go find out." Nathan hired the professor. Paid $18,000 for a preliminary survey. Dr. Albright's team went to Monterey, drilled cores, collected samples, ran lab analyses. The process took 45 days. 45 days of corrosive anxiety. Of sleepless nights. Of a business going under. Of bills piling up. Of calling the bank begging for extensions. Of eating ramen because he couldn't afford anything else. And when the results came in, Dr. Albright called Nathan at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. His voice was different. Excited. The normally calm, methodical, almost monotone professor was excited. "Nathan, can you come in today? I need to show you something." Nathan went. And what the professor showed him changed everything. The reports confirmed it. The mineral deposit wasn't shallow. It was deep. And extensive. Much more than the professor had imagined 20 years earlier. Mr. Samuel's 3/4 of an acre sat on top of one of the most concentrated zinc barite pockets ever documented in that section of the Cumberland Plateau. The professor said, his voice shaking, "Nathan, if it holds up in the detailed survey, we're talking about a deposit that could be worth millions. Not thousands. Millions." Nathan didn't react at first. Just stood there. Staring at the report. The words didn't register. The numbers didn't register. Nothing registered. Millions. On a piece of land that a dying old man gave him as a gift. A piece of land that was worth nothing. In a small town in rural Tennessee. Now, and I need to be honest here, it wasn't magic. It wasn't overnight. The process of turning that mineral deposit into real money took time. A lot of time. Nathan needed a lawyer who specialized in mineral rights. He needed environmental permits. He needed a detailed survey that cost another $60,000, money he got through a loan using his remaining 4 trucks as collateral. He needed reports, technical assessments, environmental impact studies. The whole process took a year and a half. A year and a half of uncertainty. Of waking up every day not knowing if this was going to turn into something or if it would be the final blow that destroyed everything for good. The business, during that time, nearly went under. Nathan had to sell 2 trucks to pay his employees. Was left with 2 trucks and a skeleton operation that barely covered costs. He went back to making deliveries himself. Slept in the truck to save on gas. Ate at the cheapest diners on the road. And every night, before falling asleep, he read Mr. Samuel's letter. Not the whole thing. Just the last paragraph. The one that said, "Of all the cars that passed on that highway, yours was the one that came back." But after a year and a half, the detailed survey was complete. And it confirmed everything. The deposit was real. It was substantial. It was economically viable. And when Nathan received the first offer from a mining company interested in the extraction rights, the number on the paper was $3.2 million. $3.2 million. Nathan read the number. Read it again. Read it a third time. And the first thing he felt, the very first thing, wasn't joy. Wasn't relief. It was longing. A longing so deep it physically hurt. Missing Mr. Samuel. Missing that pot roast. That porch with 2 plastic chairs. That voice saying, "You're already here, son. Nobody needs proof." He didn't accept the first offer. Hired a consultant from the mining sector and, after negotiations that lasted 3 months, closed a royalty-based extraction rights agreement. Without getting into technical details you don't need to know, the deal guaranteed Nathan an upfront payment of $1.1 million, plus a percentage on every ton extracted over 20 years. The conservative estimate was that, over the life of the contract, he would receive between $5 and $7 million. Conservative estimate. And if the deposit was larger than mapped, which Dr. Albright thought was likely, it could reach $10 million. From a plot of land behind an old man's house who lived on Social Security. From a piece of land that Nathan received as a gift because he pulled his truck over on a highway to help a stranger. The irony of this story isn't the money. The irony is that Nathan stopped on that highway for a reason he himself despised: empathy. A feeling he spent his entire life treating as weakness. Something for people who didn't make it in life. And it was precisely that weakness that changed everything. But I promised you a twist. And the twist isn't the money. The money is the easy part of the story. The part everyone wants to hear. The part that makes the algorithm work. The twist is something else. And it changes everything. Remember Mr. Samuel talked about the boy he raised? The homeless kid he took in back in the 80s? Who stayed for years and then vanished. 6 months after closing the mining deal, Nathan was in Nashville, in the company's new office, because yes, he rebuilt the business, now with 18 trucks and 2 warehouses, when he got a visitor. A man in his early 50s. Thin. Graying hair. Sunken eyes. Simple but clean clothes. The man asked for Nathan. The receptionist asked for a name. "Tell him it's Gerald. He doesn't know me, but he knew my foster father. Samuel. Mr. Samuel from Monterey." Nathan froze when the receptionist relayed the message. The boy. The homeless kid that Mr. Samuel raised and who disappeared at 16. Gerald. Nathan had him come in. And when the man sat down across from him, Nathan understood why Mr. Samuel said the two of them were alike. Not physically. But the eyes. That same defensive hardness. That same armor made of pride and fear. Gerald told his story. Left Monterey at 16 because he was ashamed of being supported. Ashamed of not having a real family. Ashamed of depending on an old man who wasn't even his father by blood. Went to Memphis, worked construction, washed dishes, parked cars. Got married. Had 2 kids. Got divorced. Lost jobs. Got new ones. Lost them again. And throughout all those years, he thought about going back to Monterey. Thought about it many times. But the shame was bigger. The shame of having left without even saying thank you. And now, he found out that Mr. Samuel had died. Heard through the cousin of someone he knew from Monterey. And he came looking for Nathan because he'd heard he was the young man who took care of the old man in his last months. Gerald didn't come asking for money. Didn't know about the land. Didn't know about the mining. Didn't know about any of it. He came to ask for forgiveness. To ask Nathan for forgiveness because he didn't have the courage to ask Mr. Samuel while he was alive, and now he needed to ask someone. Anyone. Because the weight of having abandoned that man had been destroying him from the inside for 35 years. And here is where I need you to focus. Because what Nathan did next is the real reason I'm telling you this story. Nathan looked at Gerald. Saw in him everything Mr. Samuel had described. The same pride. The same fear. The same inability to accept help without feeling like he was losing his dignity. And he made a decision. He hired Gerald. Gave him a job at the trucking company. Started as a warehouse hand. In 3 months, he was a driver. In 6, a route coordinator. not out of charity. Gerald was good, disciplined, punctual, hard-working. Everything Mr. Samuel said he was, he still was. The years on the streets hadn't taken that from him. And Nathan did one more thing. He took a portion of the mining money, a significant portion, and created a foundation. Called it the Samuel Baines Foundation. The purpose was simple: helping elderly people in situations of loneliness and abandonment in the Monterey area and surrounding communities. Home visits, medical follow-ups, company. The most basic and most difficult thing in the world, company. Gerald is the foundation's director today. And now comes the twist. The real twist. The one I promised you at the very beginning. Remember how I told you Mr. Samuel cut the radiator hose on purpose? That he stopped on the highway and waited for someone to pull over? That 32 cars passed before Nathan? Remember that? Well, he lied. In the letter, he lied. Mr. Samuel didn't cut the hose. The hose cracked on its own. The car was old. The radiator was old. It overheated on the highway the way it overheated once every couple of months. The hose cracked because old hoses crack. There was no sabotage. There was no pact with God. There was no cosmic test. The old man simply broke down on the road and a stranger stopped to help. I know what you're thinking. But why did he write that in the letter then? Why make up that story? And the answer is the entire lesson. Mr. Samuel made up the story because he knew Nathan needed to hear it. He knew Nathan had lost everything, the fiancé, the money, the stability, because of a stranger. And he knew that, without a grand narrative, without a greater purpose, without the feeling that all of it had some meaning, Nathan would carry guilt for the rest of his life. The guilt of having wasted time and money on a stranger. The guilt of having chosen a lonely old man over a house, a marriage, a normal life. Mr. Samuel manufactured meaning. Created a beautiful story, the pact with God, the 32 cars, the test of humanity, so that Nathan could look back and think, I didn't waste anything. I saved a life. And the land? The land was real. The deposit was real. The money was real. That part wasn't invented. But Mr. Samuel didn't know about the deposit. He said in the letter that he knew. Said he'd kept the geologist's card on purpose. Said he'd been waiting for the right moment to tell Nathan. But the truth, which Nathan only discovered later, talking to Dr. Albright, is that Mr. Samuel turned down the geologist's offer 20 years before because he didn't want to sell his father's land. Not because he knew about some hidden treasure. He was a simple man who died without knowing he'd been sitting on top of millions. And the letter? The letter was Mr. Samuel's last great act of love. He wrote a story that transformed everything, the suffering, the loss, the sacrifice, into something with purpose. He gave Nathan a founding myth. A narrative that made every painful choice seem right, necessary, sacred. And here's where it gets truly deep. Because the question this story asks is, does it matter? Does it matter that Mr. Samuel lied? The result was the same. Nathan stopped. Nathan helped. Nathan was transformed. The land existed. The zinc existed. The foundation exists. Gerald found redemption. Hundreds of elderly people are being cared for today because of a chain of events that started with a truck pulling over on the shoulder. Mr. Samuel's lie didn't create any of that. It just gave meaning to what had already happened. And here I come back to the question from the beginning. Would you help a stranger if you knew it would destroy everything you built? Nathan's answer was yes. And he didn't know about the land. Didn't know about the minerals. Didn't know he was going to receive millions. He helped knowing he'd lose. Helped while he was losing. Helped after he'd already lost. And that's why this story isn't about money. It's not about land or minerals or million-dollar contracts. It's about something we forget every single day, that the act of helping someone, the genuine act, without expecting anything in return, without calculating the payoff, without thinking, what do I get out of this? That act is the most powerful thing a human being can do. Not because the universe rewards you. Not because God is testing you. Not because there's karma or energy or some mystical law of reciprocity. But because the act of helping changes you. Changes who you are. Changes how you see yourself. Changes what you believe is possible between two strangers. Nathan didn't get rich because he helped an old man. Nathan got rich because the act of helping that old man opened a door inside him that had been locked his entire life. The door of vulnerability. Of connection. Of the ability to give without the fear of losing. And when that door opened, everything changed. Not by magic. Not by mysticism. It changed because a man who had lived in fear of losing started living with the courage to give. And when you live with the courage to give, the things you receive are completely different from what you received before. Mr. Samuel knew this. Knew it with the quiet wisdom of a man who lived 74 years and understood that life isn't about accumulating. It's about connecting. And his final lie, the letter, the fabricated story, the beautiful myth, was the greatest act of love he could offer. Because he knew that Nathan, with all his logic and pragmatism, needed a reason to accept that what he did was right. And he gave him that reason. Even if it was invented. Because sometimes, the most important truth isn't what actually happened. It's the one that lets you move forward. So I'll ask you again. Would you help a stranger if you knew it would destroy everything you built? Now think before you answer. Because maybe destroying what you built is exactly what needs to happen. So you can finally build what matters.